major renovation 10 years after that. Like, if we're gonna touch a school, let's touch a school and take care of it. Now, that may be putting too much finances in a decision of do you put 10 classrooms on, but I would struggle to say, okay, put 10 classrooms on back of a school that I know in 2 years needs yet another thing. If I'm gonna touch it, I just assume touch it, so
It's very fair.
I'm just, doing illustrative costs for the decision-making process, this is, but yet when you make the decision that you're gonna touch a school all year, maybe have more costs. But it also, for me, goes back to, we have these like looming costs in some of these schools, and if we do it as part of a big renovation, we tend to finance them, not use summer project money. Maybe I don't have a $10 million summer, so there's a lot of complex issues. And I hate to say this because I know it's work for Doug, but I would additionally like some kind of ballpark if I was gonna really touch the school and clean it up. It's $6 million to do the 10 classrooms, but to really do a good job on the school and really clean it up, it's a $12 million project.
20, it's probably 20 million.
It's probably
If you're gonna put 10 classrooms and renovate the building.
And
Well,
go for plan
could
con,
you take
whatever.
what we just did with how many classrooms we had the good number?
A lot.
So
So
that's what a $20 million, $20 million project,
You're
you could add
talking-
10 classrooms.
I'm so sorry. You're talking about the whole school renovation.
Yeah.
The dollar figures, I'm looking at the slide that we had on the October 1st PowerPoint. So for Wrightstown, what we have in there is 8.3 million. What we have in there for, Rolling Hills is 12.7 million.
No, I'm sorry,
No,
not
talking
she's
about-
not talking about that. She's talking about
Hillcrest
if we
and
went to one of
Rexborough.
the schools where we're thinking about adding 10. If we're thinking about adding 10, what would it be
What
to
would
add
that
the 10?
require?
And that's why I was suggesting use Goodnow as the model, because that's what we did.
Okay.
We renovated, we rejuvenated the building
So-
and added 11
Two
classrooms.
advantages to me for that are, one, we can go for plan con, should it still be there, but the second is, instead of having 10 million in a summer project, I do a whole renovations and I long-term finance that, and I don't have to worry about a summer where I don't have enough money as much, so.
It's a very good question, because again, the reimbursable part is something that you have to think about. Because if I'm gonna spend the addition 6 million, but the rest of it is 14.
And I'm
Well,
touching the school anyway, like,
do you want the reimbursement or not? If you do, you can at least hold the 6, wait for the 14, and get the reimbursement of the data.
yeah, you're what I mean, think of it, but no, we were like patching it out, we weren't touching the whole school.
Right.
To do a construction. So it's around 29, so that's part. And then the timing, if I throw that wrench in, is you're building two middle schools.
It's a year and then 2 years. It's a year of, at that point, it's a year of design approvals, then a 2-year construction.
But if you're doing it and this is just conversation, if you're doing that and you finish the 2 middle schools, and you have potentially depopulated Richboro Middle, the query I would have would be, I hate, if I can avoid having kids go to school in a building while it's being constructed, do I, for a year, move the elementary school to the
Yeah, it's a-
Richboro Middle, and I do a full-on construction project at a cordoned off site of Richboro?
Now you just cut the project down to about a year and a half.
Exactly,
And now you pay less.
exactly.
Absolutely. If you have a swing school.
But that pushes the end result out.
That's all.
Oh, you know what? It pushes out and
Which
pulls
I think
in,
is
so I
okay.
don't know what the net is.
Correct,
But
correct,
for children, it is the least
Yeah.
impactful
right,
to them,
right.
but it certainly is not, next
It's
year.
another thought, yeah, I agree.
And then I don't know how you do the other one, the other
Yeah,
one.
it's not,
Well, I want to throw out there though, I don't know what the costs are for all these testings and things, but,
It's like 50,000. We'll get there.
well, but
50,000.
for me, in my review of things, I don't think I support an addition on Richboro Elementary at all. Because we keep looking at these and talking about it as elementary issues and elementary redistricting, but to what Robert talked about relative to the impact on secondary redistricting, the one logical school that would be involved in a secondary redistricting is obviously Richboro Elementary, because in the past, those kids went to North anyway.
Right.
But, you know, for a long time when we talk about the elementary issues, the elephant in the room is the severe inefficiency of Holland Elementary because of how underpopulated it is. But the other elephant in the room is absolutely the underpopulation of North. And the building that has a much greater capacity, North, has almost 400 students less than South. So if there's a 400 student differential in those schools, it should be the other way. It shouldn't be that South is the bigger school, it should be that North is the bigger school. And if we want to address that, which I do think we should, and if we want to look in the Northampton schools as to which one is the most logical one to put into Newtown and North, to me it sounds, I think the clearer one is Richboro, in part because it's the right size. If we put a 10-room addition onto Richboro, that's, you know, whatever, 250 more kids. Plus, we already know that there's an inefficiency in Richboro Elementary where it already is underpopulated probably by 100 kids. So you're talking about then having 350 more kids into Richboro. If you look through the math, that puts too many students into North. And then it just swings the discrepancy of the imbalance between our high schools. It just swings that pendulum the complete other way. To best populate North would be, if you want to use Richboro to do it, to best populate that would be to bring greater efficiency, redistrict more kids into it, but not make it any bigger than it is.
Here's the other factor. I don't disagree with anything that you just said. The additional factor to this is around the special education programs that we have that we call our district programs. So the ultimate placement of those. So for instance, right now, in part, and this goes back to Holland Elementary, we have 2 different such programs there right now, which results in the overall inefficiency of that building because we're using 7 classrooms for those programs as opposed to populating them with 25 to 30 students, depending on the grade level. Depending on where the ultimate final placement would be of these district programs would also impact to some extent, in a not real insignificant extent, what that final balance looks like between North and South. That's one piece, and we can play out, I guess, some hypotheticals. They're purely hypotheticals. This is why we need a committee, frankly, to work over the 6 months between December and May. But we can play with some hypotheticals, not knowing exactly where the boundary lines would get redrawn for redistricting. But the other piece that is really important for you to hear this evening is that, as I look at it anyway, my personal analysis, we had presented on October 1st the possibility of having 1 10-room addition, and then another scenario was having 2 10-room additions. As we look at the reality of our capacity and the reality of our needs moving forward, saying this before we do any of the real estate studies that we just added on through Decision Insight, I do not see, I see it much more likely that we would need to put on 2 10-room additions as opposed to just a 1. So it would be Hillcrest and it would be Richboro, not either or. Now, that said, if we go through the residential work that we'll go through in the upcoming months and they come back and they say, no, you know what? The market isn't there, we see continued declines or completely leveling off, then that might change that analysis. But short of that, I see the need for 2. And the reason being the need for 2 is we have to make sure that, and it's going to happen in a typical year, it happened 3 times this past summer, if you recall, we added 3 different sections, right? We added 2 kindergarten sections, we added the 5th grade section at 3 different schools, and we need to have a room. You have to have space for that to also happen. So it's not a function of just having these 22, 23, 24 classrooms and using every single one of them. You have to have latitude, because in the past, what we would have done is say, okay, well, we just popped this section, 5th grade at Rolling Hills this year. We're going to make the hard decision to combine these groups together and economize, and thus open up this space for 5th grade. So we've been able to do that. We were able to do that this past July. We won't be able to do that anymore, because that's what we just did in order to capture these efficiencies. So there has to be some grace there. There has to be some latitude there that's going to come into play. And frankly, that's going to be a piece of any conversation around a modified full day K program or expanding champions or anything else. We have to still make sure that we leave enough space in our schools for a family or a couple families to move in at a school at a grade level and pop into a new section.
Could we put an addition on Holland? I'm just concerned about, I mean, I'm not convinced we need the additions at all. I'm still mulling that through, but as a location, I don't see the proper location. I can see why we would do Hillcrest. The Richboro Elementary is the concern to me, because that's the one school that would be affected by a secondary redistricting. And as I look at the long term, if there's growth in the north, and then making that elementary school even bigger, would ultimately overpopulate north. If you look at the numbers of the current enrollment now, and factor in even just a little bit of redistricting, that would bring Richboro Elementary back up into what it should look like without the addition, that would roughly be adding 375 students or so per year. So that's 300 students plus whatever growth you naturally have in the north. And again, we don't know specifically what it is, but since the targeted number to me to increase to north is 400, that is a comfortable way of doing it. If you add that addition, even if a portion of that is special ed, to me, it seems like that is potentially putting too many students into Richboro Elementary, which makes it problematic to potentially put that into Newtown and North. So if you want to look at expanding buildings for these purposes, Hillcrest makes sense, but maybe it's not also Richboro.
And I, 2 things. To Doug, to the question of, will the board authorize the soft investigations that are required to prevent it from weather? I would think I'm probably okay with it. And in fact, I would probably ask you to do both, for the simple reason that you may find that one isn't suitable and you have to go. So if we only choose to do one, that will give you something for which to base your comparison on which to move forward. To your point, Denise, I hear your observation and it's interesting, but I think the flexibility, and it is not meant in any way to be pejorative, but the flexibility in establishing the sending areas, one of the flexibilities we have is in the district-wide programs, we can place those with appropriate recognition-dependent placement and advance notice. We can place those in any building we choose as the space to take more space, because they are, from a square foot per student, inefficient. The children with multiple disabilities, it is per square foot inefficient because it has to be. So we can use that to balance, even if we built onto the building that you just advocated not to, which would be Richboro. And we said, we built it because we needed the space, but we're going to take the 7 classrooms from Holland, which are handling children with disabilities, and put them there because the space is there, and balance it by putting the children using the 7 free rooms in Holland. We can do that. That becomes a capacity, and it is totally independent of sending area because they are district-wide. So whether it's the ABA classes or the multiple discipline, whatever classes we want, we can put them anywhere we want purposefully so that it will offset or and counterbalance any disparity in the sending units for the high schools.
That's part and parcel to what I was saying in terms of location of those and the impact. So if you recall at the October 1st presentation, we talked also about this magic number of 30 sections, because your phys ed program, your art program, and your music program, you have a total of 6 classes a day, 5 days a week, totals up to 30 sections. As soon as you have a school that has 31 or more, now you're double booked at least once a week for 2 different classes, which is far from ideal, especially when we have other schools that are in the high teens or in the low 20s. So as we sit here right now, we have 3 schools that are, based upon the projections, are over 30, and those 3 schools are Goodnoe, Newtown, and Sylvanstone. They happen to be the 3 schools in the north. So when you talk then about placement of our district programs, there at least needs to be an analysis that leans towards the north, which I don't know to what extent, but to some extent levels out that imbalance that's there. Again, I think we would have to run some hypotheticals. What you're saying is, it's relevant, it's real. I think that we would need to run some hypotheticals, and we could, but that's all they would be, are hypotheticals, but at least it would give us some numbers to crunch into and work from and look at as a board.
So if we delay moving forward on this because we need to look at some of that stuff, what does that mean? Can't happen for 17, 18?
It means,
Or it might happen before.
we're, based upon what we've done so far, I think 17, 18 is important. Personal opinion. What we need to do is we got to beat the weather. We got to beat the winter weather. So if it's not the November 19th, then as Jerry had said earlier, we can have some action items on the rework meeting, even though that might not be the typical practice. Certainly that can happen, and there's nothing taboo about that. So that would then become what we would do, is we would place that on that
Well,
December
so there's
meeting.
no advantage to waiting if you're not gonna have significant more information, right? So I don't think it's a 2 weeks wait. I'm
New board members.
Yeah,
That's the
it's new board members, that is the advantage, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like 1,000 questions in this area before I say, yes, go ahead, do the weather study, and then if I don't do the weather study, then I can't, then I've limited what my choices are indirectly. So frankly, it feels like I don't have a choice, right? It feels like I need to say do the weather study, because whether I wanna do it or not, if I don't do it now, I'm ineffectively made a choice.
Well, how much you
I
asking?
don't know.
Yeah, Doug, why don't you
Feels
show
like I
the,
have a lot more questions before I make any decisions.
Sure, so,
Listen, let me ask you something, and I ask this for purposes of redistricting, determining how many schools to close, staying within the class size guidelines, implementing either modified or full-day kindergarten. Can either of those properties accommodate more than 10 classrooms? Additions.
wow, hit me with the, I wasn't ready for that question. I'm sure that we could probably, based on the size of Richborough site, not a problem. Bless you. Hillcrest might be a little more challenging.
I went to sleep. Because.
It beat
Been there a long
me to it, yeah, exactly.
This site becomes a little more challenging, Rick. Is there a way? There's usually a way. The cost, something we have to look at.
And also the need.
And the need, and the parking, this site for sure is more challenging than the Richborough site. Richborough is a little more clean. We do have the hillside to deal with. We certainly could come out the side more to facilitate it. Parking isn't as big of an issue here because we don't share it with the middle school. So this one's a little cleaner.
And just charge for the parking.
Maybe you stay in the
If I
grass,
save enough time, maybe.
Charge the parking pay for kindergarten.
save for the grass then.
So looking at this, if we were to facilitate one or both of these additions, to work with the plan, assuming that that would be the plan, to make 17-18 work, if you needed one or both of these, we would really need an approval on the architect by no later than January 7th, in order to give the team a very, very, very aggressive approval documentation bid schedule of 6 months.
That's the air conditioning.
Of 6
Yeah,
months.
it's cold.
That will allow us to bid in May, in April, May, get bids back, review them in June, award the end of June, and allow the start of the project at the end of June to the following year, to the following summer, to get their work done. That gives them basically the shoulder season, so they have the fall, the summer and fall to start the foundations and get it ready. They'll hit the hump of winter, then they'll have the spring and summer of the following year to wrap up that addition. So while 12 months sounds like a lot to do 6 classrooms or 10 classroom addition, they do have the obstacle of winter right in the middle.
So you're saying January 8th is your absolute not ideal, drop dead
Saying,
with the proper.
I'm saying all things considered, if you got, the November 19th for the testing is something we definitely need to do, or no later than the December 3rd if we break our tradition of an actual motion on the night of reorg. Preferably, if you knew everything that you wanted to do and the board was set, the 16th would be ideal because it gives the team as much time as possible to get their approvals and work through this. The 7th at the latest to give us 6 months to go to the township, talk to them, get the approvals that we need, the conservation district, all the things we'll have to do. It's very.
I would almost rather another night out. I feel like I'm not trying to impede progress, I'm not trying to stop anything, I don't want to stall anything, I feel like there are so many questions that we don't have answers to, there are so many things that we don't have any agreement amongst ourselves. There are so many things that I have to presume you just don't know yet, obviously. And we're about to put 2 additions on 2 buildings and ultimately fit kids into something that we've created to accommodate a date that we've established. And I'm struggling greatly with that I don't know if it's the right decision. I'm not saying it's the wrong decision, but it's a decision, which is great, which some would say is more than we've made in a long time, and I get that. But it feels on some level no different than all the modulars that we put up and just took down, in case it's the wrong decision. And I'm having trouble, I'm not feeling pushed by any of you. We said come up with a plan, and you've come up with a plan. And I think it's all great work, and it's impressive, and I realize how long it has taken to get to this point and the work that went into all of this. But, I'm hearing ideas tonight that I haven't heard before. And we have 2 new board members coming on. And we're gonna make this decision effectively for them and hope that they'll go along for the ride. And I'm having a tough time.
So what I would ask is, what are those questions?
What are my questions?
Well,
We're in general.
Jen, what are the questions? What, administratively, we're a committee meeting. So we're not taking any actions tonight. We're looking for feedback. And if that feedback is, hey, we need to know, A, B, and C, then we need to know what A, B, and C are. And that would be from the whole board, and Steve. So.
To not have,
Give us
real
those.
estate information.
Okay,
To
so.
not have that alone I'm afraid we could inadvertently make a mistake. I would like a lot of the sending area information. If we intend to build 10 classrooms, how many kids are going into it, where are they going? Are they going to the same middle school? Are they going to different middle schools? Are they going to the high school? What is the plan? I don't need the boundary lines, but I need the volume assessments.
I'm also confused. You were gonna reconvene the capital planning committee. What was their task going to be?
you were
Gonna sit with
on
the
Reconvene or
creative.
establish?
Yes, that.
Or whatever,
Establish.
whatever the next, not the redistricting committee, but a capital planning committee was gonna be meeting. What
Right.
was their charge
And-
gonna be?
And we can speak in present tense and future tense, because I absolutely still want that to happen. The charge is to analyze the residential data that we're getting from Decision Insight. So we just approved that last week, so understand that. And then as we go back to what these different scenarios are, let's play them all out. So let's dig into the footprints, right? Dig into the floor plans of these different buildings. Same thing, we have one school right now that has 34 sections. It's a big school, it's good enough. 34 sections. Should we be putting a district program or even multiple district programs at that school? What does that look like? So you have time to blow out all these different models, right? And you say, well, if you do this, then here's what the big picture looks like. If you do that, here's what the big picture looks like, which is the reason why we had asked for direction on full day kindergarten and grade level configurations, because we needed to limit the scope of what all these paths were. We needed to limit the number of paths to fully go down and fully explore. So it's really this group that will study a whole host of different scenarios, that some of which are 10 to 9 with closing Rolling Hills, some of which are 10 to 9 closing Wrightstown, some of which are 10 to 8 with the additions put on and closing both schools. And so with each of those 3 big buckets, you can have multiple scenarios within each of those buckets. And so what does this look like? What are the pros? What are the cons? And then you better factor in the residential information to that as well, which we don't know yet. And we're not going to know that piece for about a month for us to even have the initial read on that. It's
Have
gonna
you
be
had an
a month.
opportunity to sit at least with the leadership, with everything else that you've done, so please understanding, with at least the leadership of the capital plan?
Right now, there is
No,
no.
there
There is no.
The
was
outgoing,
a discussion
the
with the previous, so that you would.
I have intentionally not done that. No,
Okay.
I've had a couple side conversations,
Okay,
but to formally sit down, no, I've intentionally not done that, because I didn't want there to be, right now, I want the work to be at the board level, administrative level, our team of 17 between the board and the cabinet. And then once the charge is established, so we crossed a big hurdle last week. This is the other big hurdle to cross. I wanted that, and I want that to be with this team of 17. And then obviously all the while taking public input, and then allow that to run into the work of
But this
the
doesn't
committee.
feel like we're making a decision, and so that team will figure out how to make our decision we already made work.
Right, so that's
For me-
where I'm-
For me, Doug, bottom line, how much money are you asking for here? I need a
I'm not
number.
asking for
Just-
any money.
How much money is required? Wait, just forgive me. How much money are you asking to get you through?
You said 50,000.
Stop, I asked, is it 50,000?
It's frustrating.
For both of them, right? Okay, so here's my thing. It's money that's gonna have to be spent at some point, somewhere down the road.
But maybe not
I
at those
disagree
places.
I disagree with.
Okay, but I'm not opposed to doing it, because I think at some point it will happen. I will tell you that I don't know that it's gonna happen on the timetable that you've given here beyond that. I don't think, whether I call them Titanic plates or tectonic plates, I don't think the world will shift a lot between what you do now and when you ultimately need it, or decide, or use it to decide where to use it. So for me, the immediate question was this: I'm okay with it, but I think it's going to be premature, because I really don't think we're going to get to the decision to build in the next timetable that you laid out.
Right.
That's me.
I don't think by January 8th, we're gonna get to a decision. I don't think there's enough time.
Then that means one of two things. It either means that we're taking 10 to 8 off the table, or it means that we are not going to hit the 17-18 school year.
For what?
And
That's a problem either way.
We're not gonna hit the 17-18
well,
school year
if
for what?
we want to say that we want to wait for all this information to come in, we're not going to have time to be able to put these additions on in time for the start of the 17-18
You said
school
you
year.
can't close the
So
school.
you can't close 2 schools if you don't have room to put the kids. So that, it's as simple as
But I'm
that.
saying-
So it's one of those 2 realities, if that's the case. And I'm going to have Doug's back with him saying that he's not asking for it, because in this case, he's not asking for it. When it comes to some of the capital stuff, of course he is. In this case, the
No.
board asked for options, right? The board asked, in fact, there's a board motion from November 2014 mandating options. Okay, these are the options. And the option, in fact, going back to November 2014, stipulated for the 16-17 school year. We're already talking about a year behind that. So we are doing administratively absolutely everything that we can to meet the demands of what that motion was. And so what's being put in front of you are these options. And it's up for the board to respond to informally this evening, informally either next week or in 3 weeks.
But you're describing a scenario from now until 2018 that is the most extreme. But I'm suggesting that I think that maybe there's a need for an addition on a different school. And I think you take that off the table by doing this, even if it's subconsciously or whatever. I mean, there have been so many instances where we as board members have been faced with votes where they say, well, this is not committing you. You're not agreeing to do the project. But the train leaves the station every time you set that scene, okay? And so I'm conflicted because, well, number one, I've already shared that I have doubts about one of the 2 schools where you want to put an addition. Pose the idea of maybe an addition on a different school. But we're having a committee be convened who we're asking to explore all these options, and yet if the train leaves the station on this, it's setting a path that limits options. And I don't think that everything comes to a halt. We are overdue for redistricting, and I think we can do that, even if it's not like setting the whole scene for everybody. We can be doing things. It doesn't always have to wait for the big one. And that's why, to some degree, that's been a philosophy all along, I guess, because that's why we've gone what will be minimally 17 years without a redistricting. And that is not good for our district at all. And so there are things that we can do on smaller scales that still get us to an endpoint without necessarily backing us into something at this point where I don't think we've had sufficient conversation about it.
Because of potentially adding on to other schools.
Correct.
As opposed to these scenarios.
Correct.
And that's fair.
Yeah, you know, my vision for redistricting for this process always has been, and this is why I've been so adamantly against the middle schools, is show me where the kids are, show me where they're going to go to school, and show me the process, and then we'll figure out how to fit them in the schools and build from there. What it feels like to me is it's the field of dreams, right? If we build it, they will come, and that's just we just keep adding on, significant costs and adding on the buildings and hoping we're going to find a way to fill the kids in. So it just goes backwards. It's not a criticism, I'm just saying. So I would like to can't we draw the lines first and then figure out where they go without committing funds?
It pushes.
First, I understand it pushes that time,
I know.
but I'd rather push it back a school year, than do it wrong. I mean, we've
Well,
got-
the other thing that
we have, if I can just finish, because my brain keeps going to Holland Elementary, right? The school's sitting there at 48% efficiency.
50.
This isn't my recommendation, this is providing the information.
Understood.
Yes,
I'm talking to
I'm
everybody.
not opposed to whatever the board ultimately decides they want to do. I mean, and Dr. Fraser's going to have his own opinion on this. Obviously, I mean, it's your decision if you decide to, as he said, we've already moved redistricting back a year. This would mean redistricting a year after that, or if you decide to do something, as Wendy said, where you do the renovations and additions to a school or two, then you're probably 3 years.
And I
But why-
can appreciate that, I'm sorry, I can appreciate what Wendy
I do too.
But I do, really, from an efficiency and construction efficiencies, I understand that, but I don't want to have another Holland Elementary there where we spend all this money and we're half full. And that's my concern. We just keep
But
throwing
if you're
good
gonna draw
money
those
at the
lines, you have to assume you're gonna close schools, right? So you're gonna
Absolutely.
say, because the lines are already drawn for the schools we have now. So you're gonna say, we close these schools, we'll draw these lines, this is where these kids will go. The only problem, in my experience with that, is 3 years from now, the kids will look different.
Yeah.
There won't be 15 sixth graders, there'll only be 13, and you know, like, the kids age, and, you know, so it doesn't, it's not a stagnant way of drawing sending arrows, so.
And you gotta be.
I'm in the middle, just so you know.
Can I ask
I'm
a
not
question?
against
This,
theoretically spending some money for some of this, but I don't know, for some reason in my mind, I thought what it was make this first decision, I'll put a committee together, we'll come up with a recommendation how to do it, and then we can start the construction cost. So the beginning of this, for it to me, I knew you were gonna try to come back by May, June, I thought was in that October presentation. I
Right.
didn't realize we would have to already be doing a number of these things before you came back to us. So I just have to wrap my head around the time frame and everything. It makes sense now that it's laid out, but it's different than what, for some reason, I heard in October. So I need to mull it over.
The
I
May, June piece has not changed.
Right.
And it won't change. What also hasn't changed, but there was a ton of information on October 1st, for you to hear and for me to say, was that in order for these two options, the two 10-8 options, to be viable options for the 17-18 school year, that we would need to make a decision by the January 7th board meeting at the latest.
You probably did.
The piece that is new relative to all of that, and you know, I'll own that and saying it's because I didn't think of it, or, you know, is the,
I'll own it because I didn't think of it either,
It's-
you know, it's a small.
it is what it is.
But-
But, you know, a week ago, Doug came to me and said, you know, there's actually a piece of this work that we gotta be, you know, with, and it's common sense, but it didn't cross my mind. And so we're coming to you now and saying, hey, we gotta spend this money to do these things, because if we wait until January 7th or December 16th, yeah, we're right in the heart of the danger zone, and which makes it, not.
I have to ask a question. When everybody says 58% utilization of Holland, are you figuring because of the number of students in the building and how many its listed capacity is? What's everybody using that? Where's that number coming from? The 58%. 58%, based on what? The calculation of what it could
Yes,
potentially hold,
That's
except
right.
that, right, okay,
That's
so I
right.
just think, because this is a number that's just been bull crap that's been filtered around time and again. If you put children in there who have special needs, and you concentrate a number of children in that building who have special needs, and you can't build up their class size, the building is going to be run efficiently for the people who are in it. It's just a bunch of bull crap that people coming out saying it's 58%. You're right. If you stick all the kids in there who are able-bodied and not with disabilities, it's going to have a different number. But that's just so discounting. So we happen to put the kids purposefully in that building. I just find it is so disingenuous. And I faced that number for the past 9 months with that bull crap going around about it's inefficient. It is efficient for the children who are in the building. And we can distribute them anywhere they are, and that inefficiency will be spread out. But those children don't fit 25 in a classroom. So I just want to be on record for that, because that's crap that's been out there for the past 9 months.
And
But
Jerry,
Jerry, the special ed classrooms came in this year. That building has 298 students. So
Right.
while we may argue about is 58% the right number, whatever, I think we can all agree that that school can and should be holding more students.
It can, if you take the children and you distribute them elsewhere, yes. But that building, just so we know, that building was built on the appropriate studies done at the time for what was forecast for that area. That's where it was
Yes.
built. It wasn't, so just,
Yes, it
But-
was, but the forecasting was wrong because the population severely dropped. And
It
the
did.
only reason that those special ed classrooms moved into it is because of how severely empty that building is.
exactly. But
So-
it's not now 58% empty.
No, what it is, or the capacity there as that building is currently programmed,
Right.
we're at 78.8% capacity. We have 298 students, Denise, as you just said, and the max number of seats is 378.
And if that's what, and if those,
78.8%.
and if those kids could fit, and those kids cannot be educated in 25, many of those kids are not educated and cannot be educated in a 25-kid classroom.
And that's not even factoring in our district program students. That's factoring in 14 classrooms that are K to 6 general classrooms. Where we get the 58% is saying that if we repurpose 5 rooms, which is what we would
Right.
potentially be looking at, then the potential enrollment goes from 378 up to 513. That's where the 58%
Right, but
comes
it's
from.
in the spirit of, like Mark said, to have this philosophy, if you build it, they will come, doesn't work. Because the best decisions were made at the time or whatever on how Holland Elementary got renovated. The theory being that the school would accommodate 500 or so kids when in fact the enrollment declined to under 300. The same theory applies to putting on these additions on buildings and saying, we'll build it and we'll fill it. But for some of us, the level of confidence on having how that translates is less than others.
And my look at it was, and I spoke with Doug about this today, which was, because I spoke to Doug and I said, I'm not sure about going with 10 classrooms. This was the conversation when I was in the car. But when you look at the costs to maintain the buildings we have now versus getting the children out of Wrightstown and putting them into other places, that's where it suddenly becomes feasible. Because if you continue to maintain Wrightstown or build it to make equity, you don't get to the same, it costs you more money. It's gonna cost you much more money.
You know, don't forget though, I hear you on the Wrightstown piece, I got it, but we've made them more inefficient with their solution. Those numbers at least.
Right.
If we're talking about inefficiencies, let's talk about the year before we made them even more inefficient than they already were. That doesn't seem.
You're talking about Wrightstown.
Right.
And my concern with Wrightstown, and I, I'm worried about sending kids from the north to a elementary school, Richboro Elementary, in Northampton. It just doesn't seem right. And my concern.
We don't know
is-
where that's gonna go.
I understand. I'm talking about the struggles inside my head. Because my concern is, what if we do have some population increase in the northern end of the district? So I'd like to be able to reconcile all these things, I'll say again, in my head, before we build out classrooms.
I feel like, this is gonna be up tomorrow. Those last few slides with all the dates and all the numbers, it went so fast and I couldn't process it. Well, that-
So this is on the agenda for next week.
It's tentatively on the agenda,
We need to have
pending
this.
this evening. And no, based upon this conversation, I'm gonna say it's not on the agenda next week.
Well, I do think we do need to have a discussion, because you get.
Absolutely. We need to
get
continue the
traction on
conversation,
what
But I see no
priorities
reason
for
based
what.
upon the totality of this conversation for it to be an action item on the agenda next
You
week.
could schedule
We-
a special facilities meeting to discuss
I think we should.
justice. For us to start this, again, you're all doing what we've asked you to do, but I don't know that we give it proper thought, and now it's 3.5 hours and everybody's at the end of it in terms of the light of day that people see it. I don't know. I don't know if that helps or just further complicates.
It seems to me the 51,000, what really boils down to is a $51,000 cost that would be on the agenda.
Right, that's.
That would just be that $51,000 cost. I have to believe at least at one of those schools, you're gonna build. So you're cutting that cost in half. So it's really, at best, we would lose, 25.
I'm not worried about the money.
Is that right, or is it 51?
$51,000?
I'm sorry,
51,000.
51,000.
Eventually gonna do one of them.
Right.
Now, but it wouldn't cut it in half, right, Doug, because the architectural piece it's basically the same design.
I
So they're not charging us double.
have that information next.
But what I'm saying is.
It was
so-
3801
because
and it's balanced on the other.
And based on what I told you before, maybe I do want it off the agenda for other reasons. But at the same token, you've gone this far, and if we do discuss putting more than 10, and everybody knows probably my reasons for doing that, more than 10 classrooms, then why not keep it on the agenda? To at least do that one step.
I think what we were saying is that we have new board members and if we wait, and I thought it was more, if we say yes, we spent 51 and whatever,
It can always go on as a simple discussion item, as opposed to an action item.
Well, there's not any, I don't hear any coalesce around a single idea, and so that we need to vet, the board needs to vet.
Yeah, I don't know what the motion would read.
Yeah,
But does anybody think we're not going to add to at least one of the schools?
I have no idea if we're in this schools.
Okay.
Yeah, if we go 10 to 9, if that's a viable option in the board's eyes, then yeah, you probably don't need to add it anywhere. This is all couched under going from 10 schools to 8 schools.
And I will say, I really have no problem spending the exploratory money. I really don't. I'd like to know what the cost would be, how we're dividing those costs, right? If you can do it in 10 seconds or less, it would be great. But I don't have a problem because,
Hillcrest is 12.5, and Richboro is 38.4.
that would be 4 cents.
Why is such a huge difference?
I get extra time. Because Hillcrest has been studied in many ways already as part of the Holland Middle School project. They share the site, so a lot of the things we would have to do at Richboro are new. They're not new, they're already finished. So.
And I feel then there's a couple of us, I want to think about it a little bit, but I would lean towards maybe spending the 51 too. I don't want to cut off options before I even have them. So,
And I think spending the 51 will actually tell you if any of those options are just non-starters anyhow.
yeah, it could
Sometimes you have to do
yeah,
it.
do it.
There's mud, Doug.
Right now, they are written as draft motions for next week's meeting, and this policy,
Well,
Robert will decide.
Put 'em up, see what it goes.
Yeah.
You either votes up or down.
And same thing, we need to reach out to the board members, we don't have Bill Foster here this evening, we don't have Andy Block here this evening, we don't have Peggy Sexton here this evening, and also need a level of outreach to Mike and Ed as the incoming board members.
Can we keep it on the agenda, and then if anyone has a strong feeling about it, we can pull it up?
We can vote it, doesn't matter, we can vote it, strong feeling or not, we can vote it.
But some people may, I remember a handful of times when I would have rather not voted for the item, had some more time to digest it.
But just vote
Get
no and
more
see where it goes.
information. Well, that may not be the best answer to vote no, because it may be the best answer to put it off.
We can always table it.
Yes.
I think that
Good table.
I would like to see it as a discussion, because I will appreciate the feedback from other people who are not here. And I feel like there's still just a lot outstanding.
And if it starts, I'm not advocating for this, I'm just simply saying, if it starts as a discussion item, somebody can make a
No.
motion.
Make it as a motion, and it can always just be tabled. If you do it the other way, then you get into an issue of, do you have to have extra public comment or
But
what?
that's fine,
Not
right?
only that,
Just
So you-
make it as a motion, we can always just fall away from, we can just
do a motion.
table it.
You can always
Make
make
it
a
a
nightmare.
You have public comment before you go through vote on it. Yes, it's more efficient, the way that you're saying.
Then we just table it, we do it all.
I
Withdraw it.
Exactly.
All right, before we adjourn, do you have any comments?
Yeah,
Kill the mics.
I've just been smiling about this because I've watched you guys kind of paint yourself into a box about this stuff. You're saying you need more information. You've got an opportunity to get more information and you're waffling over whether or not to buy it, to spend the money to buy it. When you know that it's going to be valuable information, the price is never going to get any better for Hillcrest. So
I'm not questioning Hillcrest.
I'm just saying, in terms of the cost. But the other thing that you've done is you said, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna stick within these class guidelines and the sending areas and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, let's redistrict. Okay, how do I use the keyboard? Okay, I need a straw. Those kind of things. And I don't know if Decision Insights or whatever it's called, if that creates havoc for you that way. But this thing of having redistricting only being once a millennium is killing us. Okay, kids are a lot more flexible and a lot better off when they have an opportunity to deal with change. It's how it's presented to them and the attitude that they're given to it. And for the board to sit there and say, we're going to be inflexible about class size guidelines. We're going to be inflexible about sending areas. We're going to be inflexible about grade configurations. I went to 5 different school districts with 5 different grade configurations. It didn't hurt me one damn bit. Excuse my French. And I think that, you're really putting blinders on yourself and limiting your options when you do this stuff. And I think, you're doing yourselves a disservice. I'll shut up now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you for shutting up. That's
Yeah, I know where that's going.